Good evening, everybody. This is Brian Powers, and I'd like to welcome you to this special edition of NJRR Live. We are here with our comrade Bahman Azad from the U.S. Peace Council. He's been on the show a couple of times before. He's done a number of panels, talked to us about issues in the Middle East, a former member of the Iranian military. And so he's been over here working with the U.S. Peace Council for about how long, comrade, have you been with the U.S. Peace Council?
I would say since 80s.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Where were you? Now, I was yesterday. I had just done a fundraiser with one of our elected Greens here in North Jersey. I had a great night. I was in a good mood. I hopped in the car, and on the way home, I didn't listen to the news, so I didn't hear it until I got home, and I popped open Facebook, and I saw about midnight. Where were you when you heard what had happened about what time last night?
Well, I was sitting behind my computer doing some work, and suddenly my iPhone started dinging one after the other, and there were messages coming in about what happened. And then I started following up the news, and it was quite a night.
Yeah, you were the first person that came to my mind when I woke up this morning. I was drinking my coffee, and I said, I got to talk to our audience about this. One of the first articles I saw was, I believe, CNBC saying that we got a bad guy.
Yeah.
So right away, I think my thought was, the CIA is doing its thing. Let me get on the horn and get somebody, to counter that narrative. And you came to mind. So thank you for picking up the phone, and thank you for being here. Let me ask you. Let's start off with who was murdered, assassinated, targeted, whatever we want to classify this killing as. Who was targeted? Who was killed? And what roles why were they significant?
Well, there were two people from two organizations. 10 people were killed right away in the attack. 5 of them officers of the Iran Revolutionary Guard, including the commander of both elite force. I was told that another general from the Revolutionary Guard was also among the group who was killed. From the other side, the Iraqi side, the Al-Mohandes, the actually leader of all the people's mobilization units in Iraq, and few officers of that group were killed. This attack came after General Soleimani landed his plane in the Baghdad airport, and they got into the vehicles to leave the airport, and that's when the attack came.
So you mentioned the Quds Force.
Yes.
And what I've heard, in the media reports is that this is like a combination of what we would consider our CIA and special forces kind of rolled into one. Seems like kind of a basic description. Can you give us more about what Quds Force is and what their significance in the region is?
Well, Revolutionary Guards are not a secret service. They are a military entity. And actually, they were formed immediately after the Iranian Revolution. Since the Iranian military was trained and equipped, Shah's military was equipped by the United States. The leadership of the revolution did not trust originally the Iranian military. So they created this Revolutionary Guards as the militia of the revolution, and actually emphasized it over the military and transferred a good part of military's functions to that Revolutionary Guard. And its official mission in its constitution is to protect and defend the Islamic Revolution. And that has been their mission from the beginning. They have grown tremendously. They have all branches of the military, actually. The Quds division, elite force, was created after the threats of the United States on Iran expanded to the question of regime change and all that. And and the US, after the attack on Iraq and invasion of Iraq, US bases were being used for operations against Iran, and the special forces were sent to Iran, and they're still being sent to Iran. The Quds force, the elite force, was missioned with paramilitary operations to defend Iran. And their function was to mobilize inside Iraq and work with the paramilitary forces inside Iraq to kind of frustrate or defeat or kind of slow down the US operations against Iran from inside Iraq. And after the Syrian issue came up and the US involvement in Syria came up, their operation expanded into Syria too, because Syria was an ally of Iran. And also its territory was being used against both Syria and Iran and Hezbollah. So the operation expanded by Quds force to cover all those areas. And they have been operating cooperating with many of the People's Mobilization Units inside Iraq. And their first function and role was to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda in those countries. And it has been. And actually, General Soleimani was a key figure in organizing and mobilizing forces against ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria. And he's very well known for his successes in that area. I mean, his role was critical in pushing back ISIS and Al-Qaeda in those countries.
So what you're telling me is while he's being painted right now in the military as a guy that was over there planning attacks on American military installations, that his primary role was fighting ISIS in Syria.
Also to protect Iran against all the intrigues that the US was trying to do on the ground there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of protection. If you look at the history of Iran, despite all the animosities, Iran has rarely attacked US forces, has not attacked US forces directly at all in any time during all this period of time. Yes, they brought on a drone or something like that, but that was over Iranian territory, not in Iraq or in Syria. In that area, in those areas, Iran has never attacked US forces or threatened US forces directly.
So while we got here, I'd like to thank everybody who's sharing that out there, and I'm seeing the messages come in. If your organization is organizing for peace out there, I've got a couple of events that I will plug towards the end of the show, but I want to ask any comrades that are out there organizing. We've got an event in Newark and an event in Somerville that I've seen already. But if there's more going on, and our comrade Bob Watanek from the New Jersey Anti-War Agenda has an article out there. So I'm going to try to, at the end of this show, I'm going to go through all the events that have been sent to me. And, as more come in, we'll try to get them out there because I certainly need some mobilization. Now, back a little bit to this guy and this figure who was killed and why this is important. So, we've heard the American kind of narrative already. It's pretty clear what that's going to be, although there has been some dissent amongst Congress members saying that this wasn't authorized. But I think the perspective from other areas of the world is equally as important. What is the immediate or maybe even kind of short-term effects do you see happening with regards to what's going on in Syria? Because there's still active violence going on in Syria, Lebanon, obviously Palestine. What do you see like in that area and in that region between Middle Eastern nations? How could this kind of affect those?
Affect us, you mean, here?
Well, I mean, like let's just say from a Syrian, say if I'm your working class Syrian citizen, and I've been living in Damascus, let's just say. I mean, is this guy somebody who by virtue of his being murdered or assassinated or whatever. Does that affect policy in Syria? Are there supporters in Syria? Are there other forces that could fill this power vacuum? I mean, do you see immediate effects as consequence for other countries besides ours? Is what I'm saying.
Consequences of these confrontations?
Yeah.
Well, we have to understand the whole context to put everything in place of that, within that context, to make sense of it. I think the whole process of this level of engagement of the United States in the Middle East began with the Iranian Revolution. Prior to that, there were two pillars of US domination in the region. 2.5, I would say. The main two were the Shah of Iran, the Iranian government under the Shah, and Israel. The one half was Saudi Arabia, which at that time was not such a major factor. With the Iranian Revolution, the whole balance of power in the Middle East shifted. One of the main pillars of US domination was gone. Israel felt that they are being now surrounded. Iranian Revolution had certain effects in other countries. A revolutionary process started in Iraq. The oil fields in Saudi Arabia were all on strike. The mostly imported Shiite workers from other countries, because Saudis don't do manual work themselves. So they had imported all the Palestinians and people from the Gulf, and many of them Shiites. They went on a strike and started an uprising there in Saudi Arabia. So all of these reactionary governments in the region suddenly felt threatened, and they ganged up to put an end to Iranian Revolution, which had withdrawn Iran from the alliance with the United States, joined Non-Aligned Movement, expelled Israeli diplomats and US generals and advisors. There were 60,000 of them in Iran. They closed down the US observatory bases, platforms along the border of the Soviet Union at the time. And that was led to US moving into Afghanistan, in a sense, to kind of set them up there along the Soviet border. So all of this shifted the balance of forces, and the whole reactionary elements in the whole region ganged up. The US created that United Arab Emirates, created the Gulf Cooperation Council as a military counterforce to Iran. So the process of trying to get rid of the Iranian government as a source of trouble for the US in the region has been going on from the beginning. Now, US started arming Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states against Iran, and caused a lot of trouble. They started several coup attempts inside Iran, which were defeated. They instigated Saddam Hussein to invade Iran. They supported him technologically, financially, with weapons and finances through Saudi Arabia and all those countries. 8 years of war, 1.5 million people killed on both sides, and they couldn't bring Iran down.
Yeah.
So they moved on to new methods. They never gave up. All attempts were tried, every form of attempt to bring down. The problem was that with the invasion of Iraq afterwards, and the collapse of Iraqi government, which was a rival to Iran at the time, Iran gained more influence and even became stronger, and its influence in the region expanded. One thing that you have to recognize is that during the Iraq war, Iraq invasion of Iran for 8 years, the only Arab country that stood on the side of Iran against these monarchies and reactionary governments was Syria. And in a sense, Iran was indebted to Syria for its support during the war. And it get them close to each other. And now it became clear that the resistance that was being formed as a result of US taking over Afghanistan, Iraq, and moving forward with other countries, forced the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they were under attack by the US. Syria became under attack by the US. So they created a kind of front, a coalition of forces to resist this incursion of the United States into the Middle East and trying to bring down all the governments that resisted this domination. So this whole agenda has been going on. It's not Trump, it's not Obama. It started from Carter time of Carter, Jimmy Carter, and has been going on since. And with the US influence weakening around the world, with China rising, Russia regaining its strength, US feels that it is losing ground in the Middle East. And as a result, it is trying to recapture the lost influences and the lost control that it had. And that is part of the plan. So they tried to bring down Syria as a link between Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, as a link within the whole front that is resisting the US domination. And with the failure of that, since Russia came in and kept the United States from bringing down Syrian government, now that alliance has even expanded between Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, Lebanon. Now it includes Russia too, because Russia feels threatened and doesn't want another US ally on its border and US base on its border. It's natural. Their own national interest calls for that. It's not an expansionist. Expansionist is the US government that is 7,000 miles away from its borders, trying to change governments across the globe. Russians are threatened by these operations, especially with the ISIS that the US created and the Al-Qaeda that they unleashed on the whole region. And this whole reactionary force was also exported into Russia. I think, do you remember the Chechnya uprising as a Muslim opposition to Russian government? That was also going on. They're doing the same thing in China right now. And so they're using these forces, fanatic forces, fundamentalist forces, to weaken these countries. And so as a result, the whole resistance front that's being expanded to include Russia, and now China is joining in, is threatening US, and they are trying to force their way in right now because they're gradually gaining and losing their control over the whole region.
Have you seen any statements out of China? I haven't seen any statements out of China. Have there been any official statements?
I have heard they issued a statement. Not Russians was very, very strong condemnation. China was kind of mild in terms of its opposition, but it was still opposition to what they did, to what the US did. But the question is, there is now a three-way international rivalry that's going on right now. And that is shaping what is going on everywhere.
And these are this is a nuclear arm.
The same way US is creating the African Command, and trying to establish bases there in the fear of China's influence in Africa. They're talking about the space force.
Yeah.
So it's not meant to be for minor countries like Syria or Iran. It's meant for Russia and China.
Yeah. I had some hope that we, while other conflicts were escalating, and I think that when Bolton was fired or was forced out of the administration, that maybe there was some hope because he was just such a war. I mean, and you know, I mean, we don't have to. For those of you maybe listening, for their benefit, John Bolton has been advocating for regime change in Iran for 30, 40 years. I mean, this man has been
Yes.
a genocidal maniac. I mean, his whole focus in life has been to slaughter people in Iran. And then he gets thrown out of the administration. So who do you think? So with Bolton out, you know, what figures in the Trump administration are influencing these decisions? I mean, we know he's a lunatic. But you know, I think that the climate in this country is way different than the lead up to the Iraq wars. We have been at war for 20 years in this country. We are tired of it. The younger generation, I think, is not as nationalist as previous generations have been. Who in this Trump administration is still adamant about these neoconservative, and I find neoliberal and neoconservative policies to be very similar, but I will classify this as neoconservative type foreign policy? Who's influencing this?
Well, it would be a mistake to look at politicians as the source of all this conflict and the warmongering. They are just representing powers that be behind the scene. The war is being carried out for the sake of Wall Street, for the sake of finance capital. And whoever is in the office is at the mercy of those forces. Well, some of them, I think Bolton was removed because he was too open about what he was doing. One thing is clear, the US economy cannot afford direct wars that much anymore. The US population will not take it. Over 70% of the US population against wars. So they are looking at different ways of doing this. They are moving into drone wars. They're moving into back to staging coups, the same thing that they did in Bolivia, tried against Noriega. In Nicaragua. They're trying to overthrow Azad in a different way by proxy wars. In Iran, they're trying to do that. They are now moving on to turning economic sanctions as weapon of choice now, weapons of mass destruction. We're talking about bombs, but as my weapons of mass destruction, but sanctions are killing more people everywhere in the world. They're killing more masses. And the US is weaponizing the economy itself to carry out these policies. And these policies are meant for opening the gates and doors of finance capital, global capital, to move into these countries. And so long as they resist it and they close their borders to it, they have to be changed. The regimes have to be changed, or undone, or subdued, or brought to their knees. And the method that they decided to do it at this stage, because US cannot afford to open another front, war front, economically they cannot afford it, not that they don't want to. If you look at it, the US military is more cautious about getting into wars than the civilians who are at the mercy or the puppets of big corporations and Wall Street. Well, because they know the limitations. They know the limitations. So new weapons are being pushed, and sanctions and coup d'etats again. And the method is to bring the population to its knees and create enough tension, enough opposition in these countries so that the people themselves bring these governments down. Assassination attempts, just another method. They are trying to do that. They were pushed in the back to the back burner for a while when US was going on rampage with wars. But the drain on the economy and the suffering that this has caused domestically for the United States people is beyond tolerance. people cannot go further than that. And
Yeah.
there's not much to squeeze out of the economy.
No, the
Anymore.
sanctions have had a dramatic effect, I think, and it's a bit, it's American hubris, I think, to say that this war is just going to stay in that country or even in that region.
No
You
way.
know, what is? Let me ask you, and I know this is not an answer I think anybody can say with any 100% confidence, because militaries and governments keep much of their capabilities secret, as with anybody else. But what is Iran's current military capability? We know they're not a nuclear armed state, but they've been they've been reported to at least be doing nuclear scientific experimentation, be it for power or whatever. But what do we know about what Iran could do potentially as far as retaliation? What's on the table right now?
Well, Iranian military is highly advanced technologically. It has a lot of support, and it's a very ideological force. Those who are, the Revolutionary Guards, if you look at them, they are an ideological force. They are very committed. They have come up with lots of new innovations. They're also benefiting from the general attitude of resistance to US aggressions in the Middle East. If you probably, the strength comes similar to the strength of the Viet Cong because they had the population behind them. The population of Iraq is behind the resistance movement. The population of Syria is behind the resistance movement and what the government is doing to protect the country. The same with Iran. Those commitments, those patriotic causes gives enough ground of support to the people who are resisting, to the governments that are resisting, that it's hard to defeat them. Yes, you can send the military in to fight another military, yes. But irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, is a different story. You cannot defeat that via your military force. Yeah. Because then you have to be facing the whole population here and there. And that's not easy. Wars
no, and we just don't. This is we don't learn our lesson. I don't really understand even at this point. I was conversing a little bit with a comrade on chat today as I was doing some research and a little bit of background too, and I was just kind of contemplating. I'm 43. I was in high school during the lead up to the first Iraq war, and I was in the military just before the second one. And I had gotten out just before we started to, we invaded Afghanistan. I remember the lead up to both of those wars, and I remember the hubris and the saber rattling and the arguments over blood for oil, and I remember all that, but I don't remember this kind of brazen, open assassination. And the scary thing that I've heard is people are already talking that we're at war. I've seen some commentary out there that this, as we stand right now, by attacking, by murdering this man, we've declared war, and that's it.
Yes, we have declared war with that.
And that, knowing the consequences of war, having been, my children have never known a country not at war. I basically, my oldest son will be 21 years old soon, and he was alive for less than a year of peace of his life, which we could even call peace because there were still military operations going on, when he was born, but not like, wars, full-blown, firefights like, we witnessed. And I'm scared about that prospect, but I like to know that maybe there's some hope out there that people are trying to bring the temperature down, and fight for peace. You belong to an organization, of course, and the title is Peace Council. And I know that your goal, even just, I think people, when they see us out in the open talking about certain politics, they don't know that there's plenty of conversation that goes on personally. I know that you and all our comrades talk often about peace, and that's the goal. where is there hope right now? Can we have some hope that there's activity out there that is going to get us off this brink, or even maybe a little bit over at this point?
Well, Brian, there's one saying I think everybody has heard that says, when US sneezes, the world catches cold. The source of all problems is here, and the force that can stop it is here. It is only the people of the United States, peace-loving people of the United States, who can stop their government. Nobody else can. Yes, you can defeat their plans here and there. You can delay their operations. You can frustrate this attack or that attack. But it doesn't eliminate the source of all these warmongering. The source of warmongering is in the United States. And it's only people who have the ability in the United States to stop this government. And in my view, one of the things people have to do is to nationalize the US government and take it out of the private hands. I think that's the key. If we can do that, we have stopped the process. But they are also pushing this idea that they are so powerful and almighty that people cannot do anything. Many people we deal with say, what can we do? They're so powerful. No, they're not. They may be militarily powerful. Yes, they are. But do you think that F-14s are going to be used against people here? Or cluster bombs or anything like that? That military is useless when it comes to people trying to change their government. It has been shown all over the place. So, and it is a political process here. So I'm not talking about any kind of other violent action. People have to understand what the government is doing in their name all over the place. And of course, it's not an easy thing. I'm not blaming American people for it, because they have isolated them through this controlled media from the rest of the world completely. They don't hear anything from the other side of what the US is fighting with. They're not hearing anything. The media is totally corporate controlled. They are corporations themselves anyway. Have similar interests as any other profit-making corporation. They are in line with them. Nobody's controlling them. They're voluntarily doing that. It's to their benefit as capitalist corporate class. They're doing it for their own interest. And they're not telling people. It's up to us to do it. And one of the weaknesses we have had in the past, and we still do, is find a way to reach the people, and let them know.
Yeah. I was
That's
up.
why people like you are doing a great service. Honestly, I mean it. We need so many more of those.
We're trying. You know, I was up in Patterson last night speaking at a Green Party thing for our comrade that got elected to a school board up there, Corey Teague. And we should mention, of course, hashtag Justice for Jamaica is still going on. We're looking for justice for that family. But you know, coming off of that really good community spirit event, and we talked about how social justice and activists really start narratives and get them going out in the public. And if there's one thing I can give credit to the left in this country for, even though we know we're not a large political force, we are effective when it comes to starting narrative. And I could point to the $15 an hour minimum wage, you know, improvements, although not, you know, a good medical system, but, you know, changes in medical and healthcare and social security. And, you know, if you look back throughout our history, it's always been the far left and the people that always get discredited at the end, you know, communists and anarchists and radicals, who take the brunt of the backlash, never get the credit that they truly deserve. But I think we need to push the narrative of peace as hard as we can, because we are capable of changing things. And I really thank you for that, those moving words about how we can make a difference right here, because apathy and a sense of not being able to make a difference really is the enemy, I think, in this situation. I'd like to wrap up. We do have a couple of events I want to talk about and make sure that people understand they're out there. But before I go, I just want to make sure that you get any final thoughts in. If the U.S. Peace Council or any activities that we could go take a look, how do we stay informed about what's going on out there?
Okay, great, thanks. First of all, I have one important event coming up. We have a tour of Venezuela Embassy Protectors on the East Coast, in New York, New Jersey, New Haven, Connecticut, Philadelphia. It starts on January 24th and goes through 29th, 28th. We're going to have two events in New Jersey. One in Highland Park, Reformed Church of Highland Park, hosted by Central Jersey Coalition Against Endless War. And the second in Princeton. That one is a limited space and it requires RSVP. We have not completely announced it, although we sent out the tour information today. That's one event. Another event that is going on is further down the road, but it's in March, March 28th and 29th in Cyprus. The Coalition Against U.S. Foreign Military Bases, together with World Peace Council, are having a two-day conference in Larnaca, Cyprus, March 28th, 29th. They're holding an international conference against imperialism. And this, in our view, is a very crucial and critical conference, because at the end, everything, every source of every problem comes back to imperialism. And we need to defeat that, but there's a lot of confusion about that. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that. And we're hoping that this conference will be making a big contribution toward a better understanding of why imperialism is the main source of all problems that we have, both domestically and internationally. And try to mobilize the anti-imperialist forces around the world. This is a qualitative step beyond the global campaign against US NATO military bases that we organized in Dublin.
Yes.
The third step after Baltimore and then Dublin, and now this one is going to be.
All right.
So that's another one. But we have a Embassy Protectors Defense Committee that is ongoing, and we need to protect them because through their hearings, recent pre-hearings prior to the trials that start in February, in fact, the judge has denied them the right to bring to the court any discussion of what's happening in Venezuela. What is the story with Guaido? Who is the legitimate government of Venezuela and all that? They said it's out of the court. You cannot discuss any of that. You have to only discuss why you refuse to leave the embassy when the police ask you. That's the limit of their evidence that they can provide.
And of course,
the judge has also called them a gang during the hearings, recent hearings.
Oh boy.
And I said, all evidence points to your guilt. So the stage is being set up to really convict them. give them the maximum sentence of 1 year in prison for each of them and $100,000 in fines.
And of course,
So we are in an emergency gear right now to try to figure out what we can do. We need a mass mobilization around this issue, and that's why they are going on a tour. We need huge fundraising because we know it's going to be a huge legal battle.
Yes.
With attorneys and all that. And also we need political mass mobilization to flood the offices of the prosecutor and the attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've discussed this, and we appreciate you bringing it back up again. Of course, we were talking about Margaret Flowers, Kevin Zeese, and a number of other comrades. New Jersey Revolution Radio was down there. Diane Moxley, Tom Violet, a number of streamers. I think Cora Santa Guido was down there. So we've been on top of this, and I know Diane has taught me that an action is never done until everything is done, and that includes court proceeding. This is part of an action. If you saw what the Embassy Protected Collective did by occupying the Venezuelan embassy, it was the keys were handed to them by the legitimate president of that country. They were in there, under Nicolas Maduro and the legitimate government of Venezuela's permission. They did nothing wrong, and so
none of that argument is allowed in the court now.
Yeah, and they were, well, I can say it on my podcast though, so ha ha ha. And these are comrades, and the action isn't over, even though they're out and things politically are moving along. The action is not over because there's still these criminal charges and a possibility of a prison sentence, and so we encourage you to give if you have a few dollars.
Yes.
To this cause.
All four of them will be on this tour, so you can hear all of them.
Absolutely. All right. So we want to make sure that people know what's out there. I've been encouraging people, if you have events going on that are related to peace and stopping this war, we're on like an all hands on deck type situation. I want to make sure that if there's an event near you, an action near you, a letter writing campaign, a call banking campaign, you're going to go visit your senator or congressman's office. Let's do our best to support what you can out there. We all have our own, capabilities but I will encourage you to do what you can do. There are 2 events that have been sent to me already. One going on in Newark, January 5th. So that'll be Sunday, happening at 1 p.m. in Military Park. I've got Pax Christie, our comrade Kathy O'Leary, is organizing this. She's awesome. She's been on immigrants' rights issues for a long time, and I'm really glad to see her and Pax Christie getting this rally together again. Military Park, 1 p.m. The theme of that is no more blood for oil, no war with Iran. We have heard that saying for so long, and we're going to say it loudly again. There is another event which you referred to, my comrade, and if my computer will work with me, there we go. This one is happening tomorrow, Saturday, 12 p.m. in Somerville, New Jersey. This is going to happen in front of the Marine Recruitment Center, 41 West Main Street, Somerville, New Jersey. This is in downtown Somerville. I know where it's at. A very visible spot. Bring some good-looking signs. Be prepared to be heard. It is a thoroughfare. There's, on the weekends, if it's, I don't know what the weather's supposed to be, but, it was kind of sunny out some days, even though it's been cold out, but this is a good visibility spot. So get out there if you're in the Somerville area. Again, that is going to happen at 12 p.m. in front of the Marine Recruitment Center, 41 West Main Street in Somerville, New Jersey. If you have other actions coming up, please let us know. If there's an action in your area, I encourage you to contact the organizers and be seen and be heard. I think is probably the most important part of this. Other than that, we'll keep you informed. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight to this special report on New Jersey Revolution Radio. I'm going to get right to work after this. I'm going to turn it into a podcast. It's going to go out at www.njrevolutionradio.com, Stitcher, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts. Let's share it around, comrades. Let's make sure we do the best job we can for peace, all right? Thank you, my comrade. I will talk to you soon, all right? Have a great night.
Thank you.